Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video, and welcome back to the C programming series. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at loops. Alright, so the first question that might come into your mind is, what exactly are loops? If this is your first time hearing about them in programming. Well, loops essentially allow us to execute code or a few statements multiple times. So they allow you to execute the same piece of code multiple times without doing it manually. And the second question that might be coming into your mind is, well, how exactly is this going to help us? Well, this helps especially, as I mentioned, when you need to execute code more than once, or you want to repeat your code depending on what a user prints out. And we'll look at an example at the end of the video. So when it comes down to loops, there are multiple loops that you can have in programming languages. You have your for loops, you have your while loops, you have your do while loops. Now in this video, I'm going to be covering two of my favorite, or two of the most important ones, and that are the for and while loops. Alright, so let's get started. So as I mentioned, it really just comes into play when you're trying to execute code multiple times, or you do not want to manually write every piece of code, and you want to utilize either mathematical operators to do the work for you. So in this case, we're going to be starting off with the for loop, and we're going to be using a simple program that I'm sure everyone has done or used, and that is a program to essentially print the numbers 1 to 10 automatically. The library here, standard library.h, and let me include my stdio, my standard input output. I actually should do this before, but in any case, let me just create a main function here. And in the main function, I'll also return 0, so we always can check if our function is doing everything correctly. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an integer. I'm going to create a variable int x, and this is not going to have any value, and I'll talk about initialization in a second. So the structure of a for loop is really very simple. Simple in the sense that it's very simple to understand how it goes about, essentially how the initialization goes about. So the syntax is as follows. So you have your for loop, you started with for, and in parentheses is where you initialize the variable. So I could have initialized the variable saying int x equal, and I give it a value. The value is very important because it acts as the counter. All right. You then have the condition under which you're performing the loop. And finally, you have the increment. So let me just give you a very small example. So I can say int x, but in this case, I've already initialized it outside of the for loop, which I want in this case. So I'm just going to say x is equal to, I'll give it a value of 1, meaning we'll start off from 1. And then since this loop is going to print out numbers from 1 to 10, we'll keep the value from 1. You can also change it to 0 if that's what you want. Now it is the condition under which this loop will be executed and when it will stop. So I'm going to say execute this loop until the value of x is going to be, I can say whatever I want. In this case, we're going to say I want you to keep it less than 10. So I want you to execute this loop until the value of x is less than 10. Once it crosses that threshold, stop the loop or break the loop. So use a semicolon there to separate these conditions. And then finally, I use the increment operator. So every time this loop runs, I want to increase the value of x by 1. You can change this to whatever you want. So I'm going to say x is equal to x plus 1. That is standard programming, but incrementing a variable by 1 or incrementing itself every time you go through a loop. And then we open up our curly braces. And then in here is where you put the code that you want to be executed. In this case, I can put anything I want, really. Anything that I could put an if statement, I could put a mathematical operation. But in this case, we simply want to print out the numbers 1 to 10, and x is going to be our counter. So what we need to do is just type in printf, and in here we need to specify the type of data we're outputting. So it's going to be in the form of a decimal, and we are outputting the variable x. All right. So now if we print this out, something is going to happen, and this is where I actually need to move to the next line for every time this loop comes about. So I'm going to use the n command. So \n, and that is going to move us to the next line every time this loop runs, which is going to do about 10 times until the value is 10. All right. So let me save this, and we can just compile and run this. So give that a few seconds. And as you can see, it printed out for us the numbers 1 to 9. And of course, that's because if you want to go from 1 to 10, then I would start off, for example, from 0 here. And if I just compile and run one more time, you can see that now it goes all the way from 0 to 9. And again, if you want to keep it to the entire value of 10, I'll keep this. I can say x is less than, so I can say x is less than or equal to 10 right over here. And we can compile and run that one more time. And as you can see, it will go to the value of 10. Alright, so that is how to use a for loop. And let me just explain it one more time. So the structure of a for loop is very simple. Now you can initialize the variable inside the for loop. So I can say int x equals 0. And I can get rid of that line of code. And if I just compile and run this, well, it gives me the error. And I'll explain why it does that. Now, if I was to externally declare it, we would have a different case. So that's what I was trying to point out. So x is equal to 0. So the initialization happens within the for loop. Alright, and that's primarily what I wanted to talk about. So this would work, but if I was to declare it globally, something else would happen, and I'll get to that as we move along. So that is the structure. So initializing the variable here int x, and then you start, you declare it and then initialize the value here. You set up the condition under which you want the loop to run. In this case, we want the loop to run until the value of x is less than or equal to 10. And then we increment it, by 1 every time this loop runs, and it's storing the value into x every time. And then every time the loop runs, I want you to print this out. I want you to print this statement out until the value of x is less than or equal to 10. And then after that, the loop is closed and it essentially ends the entire program, giving us the return over here if the script executed correctly, which as you can see, it does just over here. Sorry about that. And there we are, returned with a value of 0. Alright, so that is how to essentially create a for loop. And this can work in various ways. And at the end of the video, I'll be showing you an example where we'll be encapsulating everything we've learned so far in creating a very nice program that'll really show you the power of loops. Alright, let's move on to while loops. Alright, now while loops are a little bit different in the way they work. So a while loop is very simple to understand. But in my mind is one of the most powerful ones apart from the for loop, which also has its uses. Alright, so let's talk about a while loop. So let me just get rid of all of this here and we'll talk about a while loop. So a while loop works really very simply. As I mentioned, the syntax is as follows. You have while, and in here is where you have your condition, which can be anything. And under this is where you have your code that you want to execute it, and of course you end it with a semicolon, and that's essentially a while loop. Now again, I'm going to give you a very simple example where I will print out 1 to 10 with the while loop again, and then I'll show you how to use loops more professionally or in a much better way. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is, again, we have to give it, we need to initialize the variable this time outside of the while loop. You cannot, remember, we're only specifying the condition. Apologies for that, guys. My phone always seems to go off whenever I'm trying to make a video, so apologies for that. So as I mentioned, the while loop does not contain any initialization, and all is provided, the only thing you provide in the parentheses is the condition itself. Alright, so in this case, I'm just going to create the same variable int x, and this time I'm going to give it the value of 1. I'm going to initialize it right over there outside of the loop, and then while we create our loop, and then inside our condition, inside the while loop is where we provide our condition similar to the for loop, and then the increment can then be provided within the conditions here, within the code that is to be executed. That's the most important bit. So this is the condition. So we're going to say while x is less than or equal to 10, and then we open up our curly braces, and this is where you put in the code that you want to be executed. In this case, we are simply going to do the same thing we did with the for loop, and we are going to increment it by 1 every time it runs. So we're just going to say printf, and again we're specifying the type of data, which is decimal point here, and x. And then after this, we need to increment it. So you can increment it the same way we did by typing in x is equal to x plus 1, or you can do it the other way, which is much better, which is x plus plus, which will essentially increment it by itself every time this loop runs. Alright, and let me just return 0 here so we know everything worked perfectly. And I'm going to save this right now, and we're going to compile and run. Alright, so let us wait for the results here. Fantastic. So you can see that it printed out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we forgot to actually break the line here and go to the next line. So let me just do that one more time. Compile and run. And there we are, it prints for us the numbers 1 to 10 as follows. Now, of course, you can do this as many, you can go as long as you want. I can say I want this loop to run, until x is less than or equal to 100, which means it will go all the way to 100. So if I compile and run, you'll see it'll print out all the numbers from 1 to 100. And now is where you can see the real power of a loop. Now, of course, these examples are not doing the loops any justice in terms of their functionality and what they can offer. So I'm going to create a simple script here that again will ask a user for their age, and it will test it against the legal drinking age. And if you're over the age, the legal drinking age, it will print out, please, it'll print out you're old enough to drink, similar to what we did in the previous video. And then the interesting thing is we're going to incorporate a loop and functions. And what's going to happen is where we're going to make sure that the script prompts the user as to whether or not they want to run the script again. And if they do, they enter an option and then it runs the script if they chose the correct option. And if they didn't, then it ends the script right over there. All right, so I'm going to leave the standard libraries right over there, and we're just going to create a main function ourselves this time. And the main function in this case is only going to be used for function calls because we're not going to be doing anything extra in here. So we're just going to leave the main function as it is. So now we are creating our own functions now that are going to essentially, this is going to encapsulate all that we've learned so far. All right, so let's create our first function here, and the first function is going to be responsible for decision making. All right, so I'm just going to give it a return data type of integer. So we're going to call it decision making. We're not going to specify any parameters in there, and we're going to open up our parentheses here. We're going to provide a variable. We're going to create a variable, and we're going to call it int age. Let's call it int age instead of int a. And we're now going to print f. We're going to prompt the user to enter the age. So we're going to say, please enter your age. All right, and they're going to enter their age here, and after they've entered the age, we're going to scan f here, and we are going to again provide the data type that we're inputting and store it to the variable. We're going to store it to the variable age here. All right, so now we have the user's age into the variable age. Now we need to use our conditional statements, which are if statements, to perform the test. So again, we're going to say if age is greater than or equal to 18, I want you to print out the following, and we're going to say printf, printf, you are old enough to drink. All right, so you are old enough to drink, and we're going to close that up, and then we're going to use the else statement right over here to give us another option in case the user enters an age that is younger. All right, so we're going to say printf right over here, and we're going to say you are not old enough to drink. All right, and like that, we have a simple test here that will test the value that the user inputs. Now, the interesting thing comes in when we create our other function that will essentially provide us with a loop to essentially repeat this process if the user chooses to do so. Okay, so let me just show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to create another loop. I'm going to create another function, and I'm going to call it loop. All right, and of course you can name it to whatever you want. The whole purpose here is to understand how we're going to create a very interactive program here. So I'm going to create another variable called response. All right, so I'm just going to call it response. I'm not going to give it any value because the user is going to input the value. Now I'm going to provide this script with a bit of a user interface. So please bear with me if this looks confusing. So I'm just going to create a divider here. So I'm just going to use the simple dashes here with the greater than and less than sign here. And that's going to separate the content. It's going to separate the test, the data that's being displayed here from the actual loop and the decision making. So I'm going to now prompt the user. I'm going to ask the user whether he or she wants to run the script again. So I'm going to say, do you want to run the script again? All right, and this is a very simple question, and I think I should actually break line here. So we're asking the user if they want to run the script again. So now we're going to provide them with options. All right, so the options are going to be option 1 is yes. It's going to be yes, and we're going to break the line here one more time. Sorry about that, guys, that is my bad. We're going to break the line to go to the next line, and we're going to give the user another option. And we're going to say 2. So the value 2 is going to be equal to no. All right. So if they select 1, it's going to be yes, and if they select 2, it's going to be no. So if they press 1, then I want this function to repeat one more time and to give the user the script again instead of us running it again over and over. So now you're getting the real value of a script. Alright, so now we need to accept the user input. So I'm going to say scanf, and in here is the value, the data type that is going to be input is in the form of decimal, and we are waiting for the response right over here. So response, which is an integer data type, it is essentially the data type of integer. So I'm going to close that right over there. So now they have input their response into the response variable. Now we can use the while loop. All right. So the while loop really applies very well here because I was able to, create a variable right over here. And of course you can use a for loop if you so choose to, and I actually do recommend that you do that and let me know what you changed. So the script runs the way it does. All right. So I'm going to say while response is equal to, and these are your operators, your logical operators here. So while your response is equal to 1, which is yes, we can actually say yes. While your response is equal to 1, I want you to run the following. And this is where we call the decision-making function right over here. So we're going to say if or while the response is 1, I want you to do the following. So I want you to run this function. So I want you to run the decision-making function. So I call the function here decision-making, and like that, it's going to execute. Now, in the case that the user enters 2, then all we want to do is it'll close the loop anyhow, and we just simply print out bye and thank you for using the program. All right, so thank you for using the program. A simple exit message that tells the user, thank you for using the program. And once that is done, this should run. Now, of course, there is something you're missing here. We need various function calls. The first one that we need in the main function is we need to call the decision-making function. So that is the function that is going to run first, and we'll call it right over here, decision-making, right over here. So the main function is going to call this function. Now, this function is going to be the core of everything. So after we run our if statement or conditional statement, we now want to call the loop function. All right, within the decision-making function. So we're going to say loop right over here. And now let me explain what is happening before we actually test this program or this script. All right, so we've created our main function, and we'll get to that in a second. So we created two functions here, the decision-making function and the loop function, each responsible for their own unique task or their own unique function. So the decision-making function is to ask the user for their age, and depending on their response on the age, it gives you an appropriate response. All right. It then calls the loop function to run. So the loop function then asks the user whether they want to run the script again. Depending on the answer, it then calls the decision-making function once again to repeat the script. And again, if they choose not to run the script again, it then gives them this nice exit message here telling them bye, thank you for using the program. All right, so let me save that and we can compile this. Hopefully we don't have any errors. And yeah, we forgot, this is the part of programming. We forgot to actually have a semicolon there. So I'm going to compile that and run it one more time. And there we are. We got 0 errors, and it's going to ask me for my age. So I can, provide an age like 45. I'm going to hit 45. It's going to tell me you're old enough to drink. Now, I have an error here with my, yes, I forgot to actually break the lines here. So let me just do that right now. So I want to break the lines here. So I'm going to say N, and we'll run this one more time. And we'll also include one after each of these statements so that in case you get any of them, it prints out it prints them out on the next line. It prints out the responses for the loop on the next line. So let me just do that so we can have this nice and sorted. So I'm going to compile and run. All right, so please enter your age. So far, so good. I'm going to enter something like 32. It's going to tell me you are old enough to drink. Fantastic. You can see it separates them right over here. And now it's asking the user, do you want to run the script again? And again, we get this a little mistake where it's not moving on to the next line for the user's response. All right, so to do that, we simply just need to we need to break the line at no over here, which is what I forgot to do. Sorry, we need to use a backslash here. I'm going to run it one more time, compile and run. All right, so if our age is 45, yes, now it's working perfectly. So do you want to run the script again? 1 is for yes and 2 is for no. So let's say I hit 1. It's going to give me the script one more time as I wanted. So we know it's working. So I can enter another age like 67. It's telling us you're old enough to drink. Do you want to run the script again? Yes, I do. Let's say I'm 10 years old. It's going to give me the appropriate response. You're not old enough to drink. Do you want to run the script again? And in this case, I'm going to hit no, I do not want to run the script again. Bye, thank you for using the program. And for some reason, it's telling us here, it's actually giving us this error here. Bye, thank you for using the program. And it actually runs the script one more time. And that's because we probably did not include a break after we have called the decision making function. Now this of course can be sorted really easily by simply by using the break over here. So if I just break that here and compile and run one more time, and there we are. So level 45, and I hit no, and there we are. So yes, so I forgot to tell you guys about breaking in loops and in conditional statements, or yes, I will cover it anyway. So a break essentially makes sure you end the loop after you've called this function in our case. So once you include the break command right over here, this essentially ends the function abruptly or without performing anything else. So I'm just going to compile and run one more time so you can test it out for yourselves. So please enter your age. You can say 67, you're old enough to drink. Do I want to run the script again? Yes, I do. I'm 12 years old. You're not old enough to drink. Do you want to run the script again? I hit no. And there we are. Bye, thank you for using the program. And for some reason, yes, because I'll get to why it's printing it twice, and that's because we made our decision twice. So that means every time the script is run, depending on the number of times you use it, it will print out the exit message twice. Now this is an error that I will fix in the next video, but I want to hear your response as to how you should think I fix it. So let me know what you guys think. And of course, I know what the issue is, but I want to hear what you guys think. So I do recommend that you try out these examples. They really do help your understanding of, the various important bits in C programming. And it really does go to show you how powerful this language is. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video or found value in it, please leave a like down below. If you have any questions or suggestions, let me know in the comment section on my social networks or on my website, and I'll be getting back to you guys in the next video. Peace. Getting back to you guys in the next video.